podcast. I'm Lauren Tocci.
And I'm Ryan Tocci. We're here to talk about film and remind you that it does not say RSVP on the Statue of Liberty.
A true cornerstone of democracy. That quote is from Cher Horowitz.
Cher Horowitz, a true patriot.
Indeed.
But we'll get there.
Well, if you are new to our podcast, we are two people who fell in love at a movie theater and never quite left. If you are a longtime listener, one way you can really help our podcast out is hitting that subscribe button, which I now sound like a YouTube cliche, and leaving a review on whatever your app of choice is. It helps us to get a little more visibility out there in podcast world.
So, Lauren, kind of putting a bow on last week's episode, we did Coming to America. We got a chance to sit down and watch Coming to America, the sequel. What are your thoughts?
I enjoyed myself. It's nowhere near as great as the original. And obviously, if you listened to our last week's episode, you know I gave it quite a glowing recommendation and review. A gap in my film knowledge I'm very happy I filled. I enjoyed what this movie did. I enjoyed the callbacks. I found the new characters they introduced to be really interesting and well developed. I found myself laughing, just maybe not as hard as the original. But, sequel comedies are tough because I think the surprise of what those characters do when you first meet them is so different. In a sequel, it's why comedy sequels oftentimes are pretty, divisive because they're not always as funny because it's hard to be as surprising. And I think some of the comedy can come from the surprise of what are these characters going to do. But I would say this, I would recommend it and I definitely enjoyed myself. How about you?
Pretty much the same. I'm happy this film didn't end up in the theaters and was just a streaming because I think I would have a different feeling if I paid money and went to the theater to see it as opposed to watching it at home. I think it does what a sequel 30 some years later should do. It reminded me of us watching the third Bill and Ted that just came out with our family back in November, where it was like, no, you're not expecting it to match the original. What you want is just a lot of callbacks and a little other humor to put into it, and that's exactly what they gave to you. If you're going to see the fresh, unique take that Coming to America was, you're not going to get that. But if you just want to see a movie that a bunch of people got together, they had a good time, which you could tell, and just kind of laugh at all the callbacks, it really works.
It does have some sweet moments.
It does. It very much. I really recommend it. Just go in expectations low, but not in a bad way, just to have some fun with it. Although I do have one problem with it.
What?
The title.
Why?
All right. So first, they call it Coming Numeric to America, right? So they get a little cutesy with this title.
Yeah.
All right. First off, no, we don't need that. Second off, if you're going to do that, then call it Coming from America, which would make more sense to what this film's about.
Are you saying because we spend so much time in Zamunda that you don't feel like it's coming to America? But it's like the blending of the American experience and the Zamunda experience and kind of the history of like how essentially the crucial moment when he comes to America that kind of incites this film. All right, fine. I can tell by your face I'm not winning this argument.
Is soapbox I'm going to stand on.
You go right ahead.
Wesley Snipes, a complete joy in this movie.
He is so amazing in this movie. I am ready for the Snipes-a-sons.
Yes. So last week we introduced a new kind of category to our show.
Segment, if you will.
Segment makes more sense. Tossi's Takes. So I went last week. Lauren, do you have a Tossi's Take this week?
Yes.
So, is it a positive or a negative Tossi take?
So overwhelmingly positive. I'm going to try and control myself so I don't burn out of energy for the rest of the episode. I cannot recommend enough seeing the movie Promising Young Woman. I don't want to talk about it in any great length today, and the reason for that is because it's been nominated for several Academy Awards, and in April we're going to be covering our kind of thoughts on this award season. We're going to start with an episode that's kind of like a fun history of the Oscars and then lead into our picks, what we hope wins, and I will very, very strongly be advocating for why this movie should kind of sweep up at the Oscars. It's genius. It deals with incredibly hard subject matter in a way that, and I know this is going to sound so odd, especially if you know anything about the subject matter of the movie, There is a lightness to which it's dealt with, but also an intense dedication to talking about victim psychology in a way that I think many other films that try and tackle this subject matter really ignore. It is timely, it is important, and I know that's something that gets thrown around a lot with film, but I'm going to tell you that this film is timely, it is important, it's something that you should watch, and tune into our Oscars episode where we'll be talking about it a lot more in length.
Yeah, I agree with you. I definitely say read the description before you watch it because there's a lot of triggering,
Without a
aspects
doubt,
to it. So know what you're going in to see. But it is an amazing film that I was thinking about for days after.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it should do. Whether you love or hate this movie, it should be essential viewing.
Yeah,
definitely.
for sure. What about you this week?
My take, a little bit of a different, is it's on Hulu. It's a stage show. It's a stage magic show, which I don't think and hope doesn't scare anybody away because it's so much more than that. It is called Derek, and I may pronounce this wrong, DeGallios, In and of Itself. Just remember In and of Itself.
Yes.
It was directed by Frank Oz, but this is really his show, Derek's show. It is a very personal, conceptual, magician-type show about storytelling of his life and these key moments in his life to help him find his own identity and kind of, try to find out those questions of like, who am I in the world or my purpose in the world? And he explores all that. And what's really amazing about it is it's a very personal story that he finds a way to introduce to you as the audience that you feel your own journey as well as his journey. And it just is terrific. Everyone should check it out. It's just great storytelling. If you like magic, it's got that in, some great magic. But really, honestly, hour and a half, I would say that you're going to have an emotional, type, experience with it and in all the best ways.
Yes, it gives that great catharsis a theatrical performance should. So hopefully you check one of those out or maybe both of them out, Promising Young Woman, which you can find on Amazon. And I'm sure a lot of other streaming services coming soon because I think it's coming out of that Prime Cinema period and In and of Itself on Hulu.
As we expand this show, please, let us know what you think. Like, do you like Tossi's takes? I know it takes up a piece of our time here before we get into our actual film, but we'd love to know from you as the audience. Is this something you're enjoying, or do you guys want us to just be sticking to the subject matter at hand?
Yeah, let us know.
Yeah.
howcouldyoupodcast@gmail.com, at howcouldyoupodcast on Instagram, and at howcouldyoupod on Twitter. Let us know. But this week, we're traveling back to 1995, folks.
Back to the 90s again.
Yeah.
We're going heavy 90s in this season, too.
Much like the front section of Target, we are stuck in the 90s right now.
You were always in that dollar section. I don't know what you're
It's not the dollar section. I'm telling you, it's the front women's clothing section is so 90s right now.
Oh, I get you.
I love it, but it's so 90s. So 1995, we had explored 1995 with our first episode of the season. We had talked about Seven. And it's a really interesting year in film. And we've been talking about, we talked about Pulp Fiction, which comes out in 1994. And it's really interesting to kind of situate films at this time because I believe as we talked about during Seven, there's kind of like two versions of the 90s. There is the kind of like saccharine, like consumerism, riffing off the 70s flower child vibe of the 90s, and then there's David Fincher. So it's very different, so other films that come out this year, you've got Bad Boys, you've got Batman Forever, you've got To Die For.
Oh, so good.
Great movie with Nicole Kidman, really twisted. You've got the movie Kids.
Oh, yeah.
And then you've got the movie we're going to talk about today, which is 1995, directed by Amy Heckerling, Clueless. Which,
as if.
Whatever. Which, bursts onto the scene, in this really interesting way, comparatively speaking to the films of the time. So if you think about, even the few years before this, Amy Heckerling set out she wanted to make something that was a happy film. She's been, last year, so in 2020, it was the 25th anniversary of Clueless. So there was a lot of, press, interviews with Amy Heckerling and Alicia Silverstone about their time making Clueless. And Amy Heckerling said she looked at kind of the grunge scene of the 90s and went, I want to make something happy. And so she embedded herself amongst Beverly Hills high school students And not like in a creepy, never been kissed way, just like they knew she was there to do research. And she embedded herself because she wanted to really document this experience. What's interesting about Amy Heckerling is from the Bronx. So she not grew up in California, but she felt like, and it makes sense to me in a lot of ways. I grew up someone so hyper obsessed with West Coast life. Like, I made you a PowerPoint as to why we had to travel to California because it was like destined to be there. Because everything, if you look at a lot of like late 80s, early 90s programming for teenagers or tweens, I don't think we weren't really using the term tweens back then. It's all set in Southern California or, middle of California. So you've got Full House, Saved by the Bell, California Dreamin'. Like, I mean, all of these shows.
California Dreams.
California Dreams. I'm
yes,
sorry, that's right.
yes.
California
Surf
Dreams.
Dudes with attitudes.
Kinda groovy. I said I wouldn't sing this podcast.
Do you know Sly was a wrestler?
I'm not shocked that you know that.
Just want to throw that out there
okay.
for my, listeners that are wrestling fans.
Vision Quest will be an episode at some point. Just hold off. So, so she sets out to kind of capture, this obsession, so you have like Beverly Hills 90210 and you have Melrose Place. So she sets out to kind of capture this like idyllic version, but she wanted to do it in this way where she paid honor to the Jane Austen novel Emma. And she thought, what would it look like if the characters in Emma were in mid-90s Beverly Hills? How would they conduct themselves? And thus gives like birth to this idea for this film. It's a very young cast. Alicia Silverstone is cast in this role because of what music video?
That would be either Amazing, right? Or Crying.
It's Crying.
Okay.
Yeah. So Alicia Silverstone was 17 years old.
I want to get to my Alicia Silverstone discussion.
We all are going to get to our Alicia Silverstone discussion. She created a lot of feelings in the 90s. But so she gets, cast off of Crying. Alicia Silverstone was very much not this character. She was actually very confused why she was being cast in this part. When she read the character of Cher Horowitz, she felt like she was vapid and materialistic and super annoying. Like, that was her impression of it. And thanks in large part credit to Alicia Silverstone's performance and Amy Heckerling really kind of letting the actors make a lot of their own choices about these characters. Like, Alicia Silverstone brought a lot of heart to it because Amy Heckerling wanted these kids to be kind-hearted people, like, at their core. She said she was like, look, there's a version of this. Well, actually, Alicia Silverstone said that. She was like, there's a version of, like, Beverly Hills culture, which is where Alicia Silverstone grew up, but felt very, very divergent from her character, where the girls are catty with each other and like these like kind of harsher stereotypes. But she was like, no, she's like, I wanted Cher to be kind. And Amy Heckerling really supported her in that and also saw that character the same way. Because if you know anything about the novel Emma, the character Emma can seem malicious, but at the heart of it, everything she's doing is out of like the goodness of her heart. Like, she doesn't want to cause anyone pain.
Yeah.
So, it's 1995. I mean, it starts with the most iconic, I think, opening sequence in like a 90s teen film. It's got the most dreamiest closet that has ever existed, so much so I was convinced one day I would have a computer that would help me pick out my outfits. It's got Alicia Silverstone and Brittany Murphy, and it's got this amazing ensemble cast, and it is everything that is awesome and legendary about 90s fashion, culture, music, catchphrases. It's so cleverly written. It is written and directed by a female when females were not dominating the movie industry. So I'm going to turn it to you, Ryan Tocci. How could you not have seen Clueless?
You were getting like this like Grinch grin on you as you were getting ready to tee that up. I could see it coming.
Really excited.
1995. So I was 15 years old. So you want the blunt, honest answer to this question?
I guess.
I was a 15-year-old teenage boy without a girlfriend. And I did not go to see Clueless.
But, okay, like, so if we can, like, move into objectivism just for a second, wouldn't you have gone for the eye candy alone?
Well, it's funny. great.
Had you seen the crying video?
It's a weird... No, and that's kind of... I was thinking about this, getting ready for the show, and sometimes we have, no real answer, right? And in the end, we don't, because there's a lot of time between the time that this movie came out and when I just saw it this past July.
On my birthday.
Now, obviously, again, anytime we talk about these types of films, they were so iconic and so known that so many aspects of these movies, right? And obviously, I remember this movie being huge at the time. And now I wasn't driving, so I had to go to the movies around that time,
get dropped off
type of thing. But I do think that is actually does play a little bit of a factor. I've never shied away from, romantic comedy, as we're back into that genre. I've never shied away from romances or anything like that as a kid. It's just one of those things that I didn't go see it, because I didn't really... It felt like maybe more of a date movie, or maybe I'm just on the cusp before I'm in that kind of driving nature with my friends to go see it, and then I just never really watched it after that. So it's just one of those things that just kind of just never came about, and there's really nothing against it. I didn't know if I needed to see it. I thought there was enough of the film that I've seen over the years. You are correct. One of the big regrets here is I loved Alicia Silverstone. I go through these phases in life of celebrity crushes, as you know, even now as a 40-year-old adult. Alicia Silverstone was definitely that period of time, and you're right, you got, the Crush and the Aerosmith videos.
Excess baggage.
Excess baggage, yes, absolutely. I weirdly never saw Batman and Robin either. So I think that's a different type of how could you? I feel like that's you have to, but... Yeah.
You're going to watch the movie where they put nips on Batman.
But I definitely had a Alicia Silverstone Batgirl poster on my wall in my bedroom.
Cool flex, bro. But, and that's why it's interesting to me because, we do have to take care of the Batman for everything because just from that makes so much sense because I always talk to you about that I had Mr. Freeze slippers and you never seem to think that that's as charming or as cute as I think it is, and it's because you haven't seen it. You have to see it. No, I'm going to say this. It's not a how could you. However, as a pop culture junkie, what is considered probably the worst entrance of any of the Batman films, you need to see it.
I can't argue with that. I do want to say Alicia Silverstone, though, she's going to be voicing the Masters of the Universe, the new Kevin Smith Masters of the Universe animated show.
What
she's
character?
Going to be Queen Marlena, which is Adam's and She-Ra's mom.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, what a groovy little fun
I'm excited
fact.
about that. I also loved her in Blast in the Past, just want to say.
She is amazing in Blast from the Past. See, that's what makes me angrier that you didn't see Clueless. Because, obviously, if you know anything about Alicia Silverstone's career, she gets very much noticed because of Crying, but then Clueless is her. That is the thing that shoots her into the stratosphere.
It's not like I had this anti-thing against it. I want to be very clear about that. It wasn't like, I'm not going to see it. It's just one of those things I didn't gravitate towards. It just didn't seem to really have an interest to me. And so then from there, like I said, I didn't have a girlfriend or somebody I was dating to kind of go from that route of it. Because it is a female-centric film, and unfortunately, Teenage Boy in the 90s just doesn't necessarily...
Well, and it's funny.
I wish I could say a different answer than that, but...
Well, and it's funny you should say that because, all right, as someone who grew up, very obsessed with rom-coms, I really never situated this that way because I always just saw it as, kind of... even Tiny Lauren, it's just a girl empowerment movie because it's about, it's about friendships and about these females and and the fun thing that I think it does in a lot of ways, and look, a lot of comedies, there are, maybe one or two notes that don't necessarily age well, but it definitely tackled some things. And then, on top of it, I liked that for the most part, when you're watching, even the person that's, I think, supposed to be kind of detestable, which is Amber Ambular, I think you're to understand that she's not a horrible person. They're all kind of genuinely good people. She's so annoying. She's so the worst, but she's not a bad person.
Just ew, I don't want to see this character.
Yeah, no, she kind of. And let me tell you, in the TV series, even worse. Yes, that's right. There is a Clueless TV series. There's also a Clueless book series. I no longer have my Clueless book series to lend out, but if you want me to tell you how the storylines play out as Josh is further in college, I can definitely tell you. And I did watch the TV series, which is most of the original cast, except for Cher, who's replaced by Rachel Blanchard.
Yeah. What was she in also?
So she is most famously known, her like biggest role, I think, that started her career was she was one of the storytellers on Are You Afraid of the Dark? She was Kristen.
No, she played somebody later.
Oh yeah, she's been in a lot of things. She's been in Road Trip. She's been in
Friends? Am I mistaken?
No, she was not in Friends. Okay. She was in Without a Paddle. She plays Flower.
Okay, yeah, it might be what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough.
She's got a very
Our friends Holly and Joe, I went to see that with them. You and I love that. It's a guilty pleasure for us, Without a Paddle. I have to say, the kind of defending myself here a little bit.
You can try.
From like those awkward teenage years, that 12 to probably 16, maybe 17 years old for me is probably, I don't think I appreciated all film as much as I wanted to. I loved all movies. Like when I was a kid, I watched everything. Then I get to those teenage years and it's like, I kind of, was a little more picky. And then I think by the time I'm probably in that 16, 17, I start going back to just wanting to consume anything, any genre, anything like that. And then what I think kind of happens with Clueless is it gets kind of lost in, like I said, the lines are so iconic, the costuming, all of that. You start to feel like you just know the movie already, so you kind of, it feels like you don't need to see it. I'm wrong. I'm really happy I see this movie. I've seen this movie now with you. It's very much seeing it from a different lens, and I get the appeal to it. It's just
so angry. No, here's the thing. I am and I'm not. Because I actually really get what you're saying. Because I do think there's a part of our lives we hit where so much about what we watch becomes, there's a time in our life where it's dictated by like what our parents watch or what our parents allow us to see or what older siblings are willing to show us, I think that there's that part of your life. And then I think there's the part where you're kind of seeing the things that are either like kind of specifically geared towards you or, well, my friends are seeing it. So like you can miss out on a lot of stuff. And then like if you're, a movie fanatic, you just hit a point in your life where you get so voracious about film that you don't care. You'll just watch anything because it's experiencing
because
film.
Get a couple of years later, I'm watching the entire Freddie Prinze trilogy and I still watched all of those.
What do you mean Freddie Prinze trilogy? Do you think those is a trilogy?
They're like considered like this Freddie Prinze, like that he made those 3 movies to essentially to go together.
You are literally blowing my mind.
Yeah.
We're going to have to talk about that after the episode's over because I need to know more about this theory. But we'll get into the film Clueless itself. So I'm going to ask you straight off. I know sometimes we save this till the end. Ryan Tocci, please tell me you like and enjoy Clueless.
I very much enjoy it. I see it tensing up. A
little bit.
I don't know. Like, I get it. Like, I totally get it. This movie, it's very funny, but in a subtle way. There's not a lot of laugh out loud moments to me.
It's a lot of verbal irony where the characters are just saying something like kind of just slightly off enough that if you catch it, it's funny, but you could just like, kind of, if you're being a little more complacent in your viewing, you might just like kind of breeze by it.
I do. I enjoyed it a lot. Would I say I loved it? No. It's not. I'm probably not going to watch it without you. I have a lot of positive things to say about it.
Get to those because literally my heart is breaking. I feel like Ty at like the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones show, just like in the back.
You're gonna just drop the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones? Like, we gotta get to the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones.
We're gonna get to the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, but I need you to get to the more positive things about this movie.
Well, right there, Ty, it made me so happy to see Brittany. Like, I miss Brittany Murphy as an actress. I mean, as a, obviously.
It's a sad loss.
It's such a tragedy. So it's, she is so enjoyable to watch on screen. And I was like such a big fan of hers even as a kid. Like, I actually had to go find this. This is a little bit of a segue but I remember watching her and loving her on the show called The Torkelsons. And so...
Hold the phones. I also love the Torkelsons because she would talk to the moon every night. It was like the sweetest show.
But you know what's weird? When you look at her IMDb page, it doesn't there. I had to go do this whole deep search on this. So technically she wasn't on the Torkelsons. So evidently the Torkelsons was a 1-season show.
Yeah.
And then got changed to like Almost Home, I think is the title of it or something like that. And she came on in season 2. Now the Torkelsons, well, half the family made it to that season. And she comes on as a secondary or as a different character. But yeah, I always remembered it from, so I'm so confused. Well, I'm so glad that you remember that show.
Yeah, I loved that show so much.
Fantastic. She just radiates on the screen. She's
good. Great in this. No, so she, like Alicia Silverstone, she's only 17 when she's in this movie. They're supposed to be, I think they play with the ages a lot. I think they're supposed to be like 15, 16 in the movies, like according to a line, but they definitely look 17, if not even a little bit older. But like, one of the things I really love about her is you feel how
we have to talk about that with the Josh character, for sure.
We don't have to talk about the Josh character. Don't
you disparage? That Josh is a freshman in college and
he's a freshman.
Cher's 15 years old and his former stepsister.
Do you know why that is? Because Amy Heckerling's grandparents were former step-siblings that got married.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if that makes it any less weird for anyone listening.
I guess it's
they're not related. It is, I guess, weird. I don't want to be judgmental.
There's a little mental gymnastics to get there, but
it's fine.
Awesome to see Paul Rudd, though.
Well, yeah, and so
it's awesome that Paul Rudd still the same age.
Yeah, still it has not aged. Yeah. I don't know what devil's oath he took on the set of Clueless that kept him the same age, but he is eternal. And that was really interesting. I was reading so Vogue did a retrospective of Clueless, and they interviewed Alicia Silverstone, and interestingly enough, one of the things she talks about, because she talked about, there was obviously much made about, the fashion choices in this. So I believe, is it Mona May is the costume designer, created just, iconic piece after iconic piece. And so much so, the whole idea was that every single one of Cher's outfits would get its own entrance. That was very important, to make these, kind of impractical clothings that do end up really influencing a lot of fashion in the 90s.
Right, yeah.
I know 100%. So there used to be a store called The Limited 2, and The Limited 2 sold those plaid matching outfits.
Limited TOO?
It was Limited TOO, not numeral 2. And I remember wearing them because that's what Cher Horowitz wore in Clueless. So I was like, oh, I want to look like her, and kind of brought in this really interesting preppy, vibe, I think, to kind of what existed as the 90s grunge. I mean, there's definitely some of that fashion influence throughout, particularly with the character of Travis Birkenstock. You see that kind of skater fashion coming in, even the character of Ty for sure, that's brought in. But one of the interesting things about, I think, what makes, the fashion choices so iconic in this is that they're immediately cosplayable. And Alicia Silverstone, when she talked about that in the interview, she was like, I was the type of girl who wore the same green pocket tee and jeans from the Gap to every audition. She's like, I didn't care, but she was like, it made me look at fashion differently. But she's like, at that, I took some of those pieces home, but never looked at them as practical because nobody was wearing that stuff yet. But to bring this back, in the same interview, she talked about Paul Rudd, and the way she talks about him is so incredibly glowing, cool. As though he is the nicest, kindest human being you'd ever want to meet, and how much fun it was for him. And he did a portrait of her dog that she still had, because they asked her, do you have anything from set? And she's like, yeah, Paul Rudd did a portrait of my dog. I still have that.
Of course he did.
Nicest man alive. So
does this come out before or after Halloween 6 for Paul Rudd? Because he gets an introducing, I think, in Halloween 6.
So yeah, this was after. So this comes out in the summer of 95. So when did Halloween 6 come out?
I thought Halloween 6 must have been the same year.
Well, I know there's much mired in how that gets released, but I'm pretty sure this would have. I'm thinking if that would have gotten released around Halloween, obviously this would have come out first, because it comes out in the summer against Bad Boys and Batman Forever, and actually ends up being, or not Batman Forever, Batman Returns, and ends up doing very well and getting a lot of kind of instant acclaim for how Amy Heckerling, and if you think about it, she ends up influencing so much of how teen dialogue is written, and I have no problem saying this, as influential as John Hughes was in how teenage films got made into 80s, she is just as influential in how everything after it gets made in terms of dialogue.
Sure, but you're also basing that on one film.
No, I'm not. I'm basing that on Dawson's Creek. Every single 90s TV show comes out. But what I'm saying is
Amy Heckerling, John Hughes had multiple films to influence, where she only really has this one film that
Incorrect, but I'm going to hold that for later. Because there's actually a very important point to this about the dialogue that's maybe coming later in the show.
Well, because Amy Heckerling, I'm glad, because she does one of my all-time favorite films. Like,
which is?
literally a top 10 all-time favorite film, which is Fast Times at Ridgemont High. So she's always going to have a really, great place in my heart because of that. Because that, to me, is the all-time best teen film. And I think it is just a fantastic film all the way through.
And we won't throw down debate here, but I would say
it's coming. It's coming.
Yeah, I would say this is.
Interesting.
Yeah, I love Clueless in a deep way.
But Amy Heckerling, I know I'm going to sidetrack for a second. I saw some trivia on her. She cracks me up because I don't understand what happens with her because she makes Fast Times. It's in, it gets put into the Library of... Library of
Congress. If you don't know this, so the Library of Congress has certain films. If it deems it of cultural significance, cultural impact upon not only film as an industry, but film as an art form and the societal impact, then it gets put into the Library of Congress. It's a very big deal if a film makes it.
Yeah, so you have that, and you have Clueless, which is, I believe, and I may be not sounding like I am over the moon about it, but it is essential film watching, which is why we're doing it on the show, is Clueless.
It has a line that goes, "You're a virgin who can't drive." Like, come on, that's genius. It's the sickest burn in film history. I love the tagline
for this movie. The tagline was sex, clothes, popularity, whatever.
Which is like so reductive. I hate whoever the marketing person was because it's so reductive.
But Amy Heckerling also did European Vacation, which is, not
but
one
directed,
of
didn't write it.
Correct,
right? Yeah.
Correct. She does the first two Look Who's Talking movies,
which I love, and I won't apologize for.
Didn't seem to stand the test of time, but I remember them being really enjoyable at the time. I mean, not just because we were a kid. Like, I believe I remember my family and my parents enjoying them.
I remember enjoying them as, like, good family movies.
Yeah,
I like Look Who's Talking, too.
Right, and if you really start to unpack and think about that movie, think about some of the things that were going on in that movie. But anyway.
I'm a real try-hard not to.
She also does a guilty pleasure, Loser, which you and I both really enjoy. You do not?
No, I love Loser.
Oh, okay.
No, I love
that's
Loser.
Coming up later. I'm guessing. Okay. Again, I haven't seen it in a while, so I can't say if it aged well. But Amy Heckerling, I have to say, I love this. She dated Bronson Pinchot.
Oh, really?
Balky.
Yeah, no, I know who that is.
Just assuming.
Don't be ridiculous. Yeah. I know who that is.
She also has a daughter with Harold Ramis.
Oh wait, that I did not know.
Yeah, it's a little strange because I guess it was one of them was married at the time when this transpired, right. And I guess it was like a big secret. But then Harold Ramis's daughter Violet wrote a book called Ghostbusters' Daughter and put it in that book, and that's how this came out.
That's so great.
I just thought it was really interesting because I want to be in the room where Amy Heckerling and Harold Ramis are talking because that just
I didn't know where that sentence was going. So I'm glad you said talking. But like that's so going back to kind of the genius of Amy Heckerling. So obviously it is impossible to deny that certainly the performances, the characters of Dionne and Murray and Cher and Ty, and Travis and Josh and Christian, like there are so many really great performances in this, but it's like, I think it's so anchored in like just really sharp, very quotable dialogue. And a lot of it comes from Cher. But I think one of the things that makes this movie works so well and why it's such like an iconic teen classic is because there's this great line where Ty says, "You'll talk like grown-ups," and and it kind of announces the fact that there is supposed to be something a little bit more like put upon about the language, but it's like so clever, and that feels, and I think this is a credit to the performances, feels very genuine to the discussions they're having, like great like throwaway lines like "gotta make a cameo at the Val party," like there's so many like awesome like pieces of dialogue. The dad saying, and we had to rewind because you laughed so hard the second time we were watching this. I have a 45 and a shovel. I doubt anybody will miss you. You think the death of Sammy Davis Jr. left an opening in the Rat Pack? Like there are great lines in this movie.
I completely agree.
Oh God, is the dad your favorite character?
That's the problem. This is going to be the oldest comment I'm going to ever make. that was why this movie doesn't turn into this great movie and have the same... You saw this at the time, you should have seen this. I'm seeing this movie now. I'm relating more and enjoying the dad more than I am any other character in this movie.
And maybe that is part of it. Like, I saw it at a time in my life where I was young, much younger than Cher Horowitz, so I looked up to Cher Horowitz. That's who I wanted to emulate as a teenager. Spoiler alert, I fell really short. But, and I think that's, like, it's all those lines. But the thing is, like, I remember the dad character making me laugh when I was young, too, because the lines...
Dan Hedya, who's, just a good that guy type of actor.
And works so well as, like, kind of the disgruntled but super, super loving dad. And I think that's the thing is, like, there's so much done with, like... in terms of, like, the dimensions of everything that kind of happens in this movie, and it, like, tackles a lot, because there's a lot that happens with, like, interpersonally, really, with the relationships, which very much comes from, like, the Emma vibe of this, of, like, kind of the weird thing that happens between her and Elton that they kind of, like, address, like, head on. You have kind of, like, Cher not understanding the dynamics of her relationship with Christian, but you have all of these great, like, moments where, like, Amy Heckerling tries to, like, weave in, like, discussions of sexuality with Christian. The fact that they're, like, watching Spartacus, and there's, like, a lot of kind of, like, sexually charged energy that comes, like, from that film. Like, there's all these really interesting things that happen. I think that's why I admire what Amy Heckerling did so much, because this is a movie, to me, I've grown with. I enjoyed it when I was young because it was funny and everyone in it was super, super pretty and the clothes were awesome. And it felt like I was younger, but it felt like, okay, this is my teen movie. And then it just became one of those mainstay staples of just something that really made me happy when I watched it and I could just always come back to. And now, like, as an adult woman watching it, I realized that Amy Heckerling was doing so much more than just making something that was happy and a portrayal of, like, Beverly Hills, like, teenage life. She was doing something that was going to address, like, femininity and feminism and friendships and empowerment, and, like, kind of owning one's body and sexuality. There's that great sequence with Murray when he calls Dionne woman. And then he goes into, no, this is why I mean it as a term of affection. And, like, so there's this really, like, interesting breakdown of, like, how we talk about language and how we talk about, like, terminology and placement of that terminology. There's so many very cool things to me that are happening in this movie. That's why I think it's, like, a classic teen movie. I would say one of the best, if not the best, teen movie.
It's definitely a classic. And one of the biggest compliments I can give to this movie is steeped in 90s nostalgia.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we have a whole conversation about Marky Mark, just referring to him as Marky Mark over and over again.
I'm having a Twin Peaks experience.
The mobile phones, which seemed like this, like, not just that seemed like a big deal.
The fact that they had mobile telephones, yes.
Did you just call it a mobile?
Yes, I did call them mobile telephones.
Ren and Stimpy gives an appearance,
and Beavis and Butthead. Yeah, and you have Cranberries. The Cranberries are played in Elton's
Going back
car.
to you, good soundtrack, by the way. Really good soundtrack.
Solid soundtrack.
But that all being said, it's still aged really well. Like, all of that's in it, and sometimes you see these movies and you're like, oh, like, okay, these are all these just outdated references, but it doesn't, take you away from the movie. It doesn't feel like a period piece. It's still just really aged well, even with these moments that are just stuck in that time period.
Well, and it's really funny because that was actually one of the questions I was going to ask you. Like, do you think this is something that can exist outside the 90s and people can still enjoy? Because it's definitely found, like, continued audience, but I was curious, as someone watching it now.
Obviously, the question is more apropos to somebody who didn't grow up in the 90s,
yes,
right, to really know that answer. But I believe, yes, the answer, the kind of answer your question is yes, I think it does. I think it does hold up. I think it still plays really, really well. It's a really enjoyable movie.
Yeah, and I think it's, like, kind of the version of teen life that, like, I wanted. Like, that to me was, like, the ultimate kind of experience.
Again, Fast Times to me feels real.
And it's funny that that's the term you use because, interestingly, and I know I've been kind of obliquely hinting that I was coming to something where I would talk about her kind of collected works. So this is considered, Fast Times, Clueless, and Loser are considered to be like the Amy Heckerling trilogy, something that she's done interviews about, has talked about. That the idea is that in each of those films, she was trying to capture teen life at that moment as it should be portrayed. So now obviously with Fast Times, she does not rate this, Cameron Crowe rates this. So obviously that has a different interaction. But Clueless very much is that the version of the 90s that she was kind of seeing like people aspiring to would have been like the Clueless version. And again, if you think about all of the 90s TV shows and films that come before this that kind of have that obsession with Southern California, like it kind of fits nicely. And then the follow-up to this is 2000's Loser with Jason Biggs and Mina Savari.
Yeah.
Mina Savari, which is... it's a very hard movie to explain what exactly it is. It's wrier. It's more sinister. It's about someone in their freshman year of college at NYU. It is definitively not as, I think, wholly optimistic as like Clueless. Like I think Clueless is very like the Fast Times is, I think, very realistic. I think Clueless is hyper optimistic, and I think Loser's somewhere in between the two. So that is why, and I find it interesting, like, to think about, like, that she was trying to capture these moments to be, like, a voice of a generation. And, like, Alicia Silverstone has said in interviews, like, the weird thing about, like, being on set with, like, Amy Heckerling and reading the scripts is she was, like, she knew all of the terms that young people were using. And Alicia Silverstone said, she was like, I did not even know. She was like, there was vernacular that she was spitting that she was like, I didn't know that was a term. Like, and I mean, she has that great gaffe in the movie where she, instead of saying Haitians, she says Haitians. Now that was actually Alicia Silverstone didn't know the word, but Amy Heckerling left it in. But like the terminologies, Betty, whatever, as if those were all things that Amy Heckerling heard.
Do people still use Betty? Because I want to bring that back.
We're bringing it back.
Yeah.
Bring it back. Bring it back as if it's happening.
That's really cool to know. I mean, obviously Loser never lives up to the other two. So like most good trilogies, the third one, you know.
It makes a run for it though. Like,
so what you're saying is Clueless is the Empire Strikes Back of, it's the Godfather 2.
I would call it the Godfather 2. I would not call it the Empire Strikes Back.
We'll get there.
Yeah. But I think that's so, and this is maybe a conversation that maybe this podcast will have at some point. There's definitively a feeling I have about Fast Times that's maybe a little bit different from Ryan's feelings about Fast Times. And definitively, obviously, I think as we're all finding out, a feeling I have about Clueless that might be slightly different than how Ryan feels about Clueless.
No, I'm not saying any. This movie, like I said, it's really good. And I get why all the hype. I get why you loved it, and I get why it is still, considered one of the best, not just teen movies, but really, in film history, a hugely influential film.
Well, because it influences a lot of, like, what's interesting is something that was meant to be heavily referential of 90s culture, I think influences
the
90s
Cher
culture.
Yellow outfit,
Well, and you said you knew more about the film than,
which is really funny because it's only in like one scene. It's barely in the movie.
And it actually wasn't used in the marketing. It was the red dress that was used in the marketing with like a feather boa.
Like a feather boa? Yeah.
But I think that's the thing is like when you have something that's like both referential but then kind of sets the trends for a time period, I think is always really interesting because it, in trying to be the voice of the generation, like defines the voice of a generation, which I think can be really always like super fascinating when that happens with art. And I think the thing that I find still so fascinating about this movie is like, one, it still makes me laugh every time I watch it. Like I giggled throughout the whole entire thing. I still giggle at like when Travis Bergenstock has 38 tardies and gets up and makes the acceptance speech of like, he wants to thank the people at McDonald's for taking an hour to make their little like, it's
without
just.
Without them,
Breckenmeyer rules in this movie.
He does. I have to say, like, I have nothing against Breckenmeyer.
Small price to pay to the party gods.
Yes. Breckenmeyer is a complete joy in this movie. I really liked his character. He was probably one of my favorite parts of it.
Well, and because he's so sweet and like well-intentioned and like, he so fits in like what, these kind of, archetypes of like the high school experience are, but he is so sweet-natured and I love how the romance develops between him and Ty, and I love like, and I always feel very bad for him when they're at the Val party and like, and Cher has to say, Ty would want you to enjoy the party. And I'm like, oh, poor him. Like, no, I mean, like, it ends up giving us that awesome rolling with my homie scene, like rolling with the homie scene with like her and Jeremy Sisto, which I really appreciate you not bringing up Jeremy Sisto up until this point.
our audience, we once had this conversation where I called somebody, I don't even remember who it was, the poor man's Jeremy Sisto, and Lauren had asked the question, isn't Jeremy Sisto the poor man's Jeremy Sisto?
And then you made this, like, bombastic claim. You're like, Jeremy Sisto's in everything. And I'm like, no, he's not. And then, no lie, podcast fam, for about 3 years, every time we turned on the TV, at some point Jeremy Sisto was on one of the channels, and I was like, I think Ryan has somehow figured out a way to program the TV guide to, like, troll me before trolling was even a thing.
Lot, and his age was very strange during this period of time.
He looks his best in Clueless.
But I don't know about that.
You like Jeremy Sisto with a little facial hair,
yeah,
little goatee action. All right.
But I think now, though, I haven't seen him in a ton. I think he was on maybe one of the Law and Orders for a while and stuff. But
can't believe we're gonna be ending this in a Jeremy Sisto place. This feels like the ultimate trolling.
This movie, though, too. Also, any movie that has Wallace Shawn in it,
he's so sweet.
Is great.
But I love, like, kind of like the cranky, like, and maybe I should find this offensive, but I love, like, the cranky teacher vibe where, like, he really just honestly needed to get laid and then everyone's grades would improve. I really kind of enjoy
Inconceivable.
You have to do it.
You have to do it.
You're legally obligated.
Would you say you're a Miss Geis? Is that how you are more as a teacher?
I 100% believe that my students probably look at me and they're like, "Aw, isn't she so weird?" Like, because I do. Like, I dress myself like a demented toddler. If I had the gumption to put on makeup, it would be on my teeth.
I think you're a Betty.
Aw, you're too cute for words.
So when you were growing up, were you a tie, a Cher, a D, or an Amber?
That was a tie.
Tie? All right.
Yeah.
I see that.
Yeah, it was a tie.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. I really love, what I love about Ty is I love that you see her kind of get sucked into the world in a very sweet way and start to kind of dress the part of, like, preppy, but then it slowly starts to fan out the other way and you start to see her kind of reclaim, like, her more, like, New York version of herself. I always identified most with the character of Ty, and I always liked her best because I just liked that she 100% just wanted to be accepted, but, like, was obviously someone who kind of knew who she was coming into the situation, but just kind of, like, under the tutelage of Cher, things started to go the wrong way, but it's because she wasn't being her true and authentic self. And, like, I love because I also was obsessed with Marvin the Martian. So, like, that... Don't make fun of me. I love Marvin the Martian.
If we ever make t-shirts to sell, that's going to be one of our t-shirts.
I also was obsessed with Marvin the Martian. It really was. So when she shows him the Marvin the Martian, I remember as a kid, oh, I love Marvin the Martian too. But I just, like, kind of loved, and to me, I think even, like, on the many rewatches, I feel like she feels most authentically like a teenager, like, where you go, okay, she does seem like a high school student. So yeah, I was much more of a tie. Now, do you find yourself, are you an Elton, a Christian, a Murray, a Josh / Paul Rudd?
I feel like if I say I'm Josh,
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you the very handsome, romantic, intelligent love interest?
I feel like I was a mixture. I really enjoyed the relationship between Murray and Dee.
Yeah.
Donald Faison is just...
He's hilarious.
Hilarious.
Also has not aged.
No, at all. He's so good. That was the most laugh out loud part of the movie to me, other than the 45 and a shovel, was the car scene when they pull onto the highway.
Which we've been on the 405. She had legit reason to be afraid for her life.
Oh my god, that part I was guffawing at. Like, it was really funny.
Just relax and drive. Just relax and drive.
And listen, current person. Stacey Dash is really good as Dee. Dee is really enjoyable in this movie.
Yeah, Stacey Dash has had some weird trajectory post-Clueless, but she's very, very good as Dee. Because I also believe that she is really well-intentioned. And again, there's such, like, a sweetness. Like, there's that great line that Cher says of, like, when they think no one's watching, they're so considerate of each other. And I just like that, the idea of, like, that there is kind of this, like, Dee carries herself in a certain way, but really, I mean, obviously they're just, like, very sappy and in love with each other.
Yeah, you were talking earlier about how these are good characters, just good people, and I agree with you. Like, they're not always, like, sometimes they're just doing the wrong thing, but it's well-intentioned. Other than I think Cher with Travis is a little bit probably the worst part of that, but in this film...
But again, well-intentioned.
Having seen Emma recently, period, which was awesome to watch pretty close to each other, I get why that character is that way about... but in this, Breckin Meyer is kind of really enjoyable. I mean, I know, but I like there are these little moments. Like there's a moment where Cher and Dee are in the lunchroom, and Ty walks away, and Dee just really quickly goes, she's nice.
Yeah, it's a very
there's these little moments
moment.
that build up these characters to a really nice place that makes you really root for them and enjoy them, even when they're kind of doing things that you see what Josh is seeing, which is like, ooh, that's a little cringy, but you know that it's not meant from a bad place.
Yeah, where he says, like, which I'm sure serves your interest more than hers. Like, but it's not, again, like, she does not intend it to be that way. She intends it to be to help someone else. And I agree with you, because I think it's so important to watch a movie about female relationships that are not toxic.
Yeah.
That are actually very built in, they're supporting each other.
Because even the Amber character, like you talked about, she's kind of the villain, but she's so barely in it and doesn't really play that way.
Like a rival, like a petty rival.
I had to ask, what's your feelings on the voiceover? Because I know that's such a maligned usage in film. Like, do you think it works in this, or do you?
Yeah, I think the internal monologue of, like, a teenage girl is a really interesting way of doing this. Mainly because, like, I'm just thinking in terms of, like, examples of teen movies that come before that, not many where you get to be kind of, like, in that, like, introspective, like, what are they thinking kind of space. So I feel like it's fun for that. I also think it 100% gives us some of our best, like, verbal irony throughout. Like, doesn't this look like a Noxzema commercial? Like, there's so many great lines that Cher says when she's just, like, kind of in her own head and narrating to us. I love it. I don't always love narration in film because it can feel lazy. However, in this, I think it works really well.
I think that it's unfairly ridiculed a lot of the time, because I think when it works well, it works great. Like
it elevates things.
Rounders, like those types of movies, it really elevates it. So I don't think people should stay away from it as much as it kind of.
Goodfellas is a great example of narration being used well.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, what's that rhyme? Do you not know what reference I'm making?
Not now. I will say the most square thing I'm going to say to you in this entire thing. The drug use in it felt out of place to these characters to me.
It is one thing to spark up a doobie at a party. Can I tell you why I didn't feel like...
It's fine. It's probably more realistic.
That's why I like it, actually.
I don't know. It felt out of place to me, but...
Well, because I think they make the character of Cher so prim, you would think there's no way she does. But, like, I don't know, but I also think in that way it kind of works when it's... Because I think it's that whole... Well, it's when they're at the Val party that kind of thing happens, which they definitely unfairly position the Valley as, like, a place for misdeeds.
Hey, Lauren, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
How could you not put this as a top romantic comedy of all time last week?
Okay, so this, all right, fair, 100% fair, because I did not mention in our last week's episode. Here's the thing. I think because I never think about this as a romantic comedy. And I know it is a romantic comedy by all definitions of what a rom-com can be. However, and I know definitively if you ask me, is the book Emma or the film Emma a romantic comedy? I'd be like, yeah, definitely. But I don't situate this way. And it's not because I think you need to degrade the genre of romantic comedy or feel that films are less than when they're in that genre. It's more to the point of, I feel like this is so much more a meditation on teen life and female friendships and pressures, and finding yourself and identity and sexuality. I honestly never think about it as like, oh, it's a rom-com, even though I really love when they get together at the end.
I actually absolutely agree with you. I think that the romance between them two, although I have no problem with it, I think they work really well. It's so secondary to the rest of the film. So I agree with you. I completely understand why you don't necessarily always correlate this to a romantic comedy.
No, and again, like, I don't think it's bad if you do. It's just, to me, there's I hate saying it this way, but there's more going on there than that. And maybe it's because to me, it's like a straight up comedy. It just makes me laugh. And I can quote these lines endlessly. And I've really held back how much I've quoted the movie during the episode, just like everyone to know that.
This movie is so beautifully shot. Like, it looks amazing.
California sunshine just beaming down constantly.
What are we at?
26 years.
So 26 years. If you put that on now, and not, like, obviously we were talking about some of the 90s aspects of it. You just put that on now, it would look like it was made today. It looks great.
Yeah, it really does.
So
it's held up well.
Great job by them on that. Would you remake the movie?
Gosh, no, please don't. It's so perfect as is. Here's the thing. I am not someone who is, like, wholly anti-remakes. Nor am I someone who's like, that movie is untouchable, except for 2 films. There are 2 films I say you can never remake. I would protest and petition, would be Casablanca and It's a Wonderful Life. Don't touch those. That would be foolish. Actually, no, there's a lot of movies I would say not to remake. I'm going to actually walk this back. Most movies. I don't really love remakes. To me, tell the new authentic story of the generation that exists now. Do that work. I always find that, like, Booksmart, I think, is a phenomenal example of that. I would say Booksmart, to me, is up there with Clueless in terms of
I can't argue there.
How it tells a story about teenagers of this time. Now, again, I'm not a teenager of this time. Maybe a teenager of this time would be like, well, no, it doesn't necessarily feel authentic to my experiences. But to me, evaluating it outside looking in, I would say, like, this feels like a very authentic teen experience. And also, and I think this is the thing that's done well in Clueless and in Booksmart and quite a few other teen films, that it can feel very much of its time and timeless at the same time, where I can kind of go, no, those are always concerns when you're a teenager. Those are always things that you're feeling and working through, and those are always kind of the dynamics at play. So when those things are deployed in tandem, I think that makes for a really successful teen film.
Yeah. I agree. I don't think that you could remake it, but it's just going to be completely. I mean, unless you're trying to period piece it, like I think they did that with that Valley Girl remake recently.
Yeah,
which had Alicia Silverstone in it.
How about it? There you go.
If they remade it, I'm going Lily Reinhart. That's who I think should play Cher.
Yeah. No, I don't want to see it touched.
Recasting. You hate recasting.
Here's the thing. I love recasting things. But there are certain movies that makes me have to think about it as a remake, and then it makes me feel itchy. Like, this is something that I don't think can be touched and should not be touched.
No argument.
So, if you aren't already, please follow us on Instagram at HowCouldYouPodcast. You can email us questions or suggestions at howcouldyoupodcast@gmail.com. You can also tweet at us at howcouldyoupod. If you haven't a chance, please hit that subscribe button, leave us a review. It helps us to get more visibility. We hope that you will not listen sporadically and join us for our next episode.
And just a reminder to everybody, this was our last show from this Tocci Studios, but we're going to be moving our Tocci Studios, so we'll be taking 2 weeks off. So we'll be back in 2 weeks with our Oscar history show. Yay! So we're looking forward to that and being back to you guys real soon. So until next time we talk, may you roll with your homies and enjoy the Odyssey.